Hi guys, and welcome to another batch of mini reviews. If you don't know, this series is where I basically review 7 films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one. It's a chance for me to get more film reviews out, more opinions. They say opinions are like arseholes, everybody's got one. Well, I just happen to have loads. Loads of opinions, not loads of arseholes. And on that note, let's dive into it. I'm going to take these reviews in the exact order in which I watched the movies. They were all first-time watches, all done very, very recently, so let's dive in with the first one. So first up we've got Margot. I watched this on Sky Cinema. It's basically an updated version of Demon Seed, kind of. So we've got 6 youngsters who travel to this holiday home that they've rented. It's a smart home. It's controlled by an AI system. And it's a really sophisticated AI system, believe me. And as the film progresses, it starts to kill these youngsters one by one in various different ways. And once these people realise what's going on, they can't escape because all the doors are electrical. Of course they are. Now, I did enjoy this film, as simple as it is. The only downside really is that the kills really aren't up to much. I was watching this thinking surely they could have come up with some better ways for people to die, given the fact that we've got a supercomputer controlling the entire house basically and everything in it. But there are some decent characters. The house itself looks really snazzy. It's a very modern looking film. The film has a lot to say about tech and how much we let it control our lives. And one thing that occurred to me when I was watching this is that it just seems to me now every single new horror film I watch just seems to have that one person who's like a social media magnet or something. It used to be in horror that, yeah, you'd get the one black person or whatever, but now it's like, no, you've got to throw that one social media person in there, YouTube star or TikTok star or something like that. But this is all right, definitely worth at least one watch, I'd say 3 out of 5. The Ritual is about these 4 guys who go hiking in Sweden, and initially they stick to the marked paths, but one of them sprains their ankle or something. So in order to get him to a hospital quicker, they decide to take a shortcut through this unmarked forest, and of course you can obviously guess that this is where things go badly wrong for these individuals. They start to notice lots of weird shit in the woods, and they quickly get lost. They don't come out the other side of the forest as quickly as they thought they were going to, and so on. And I don't want to give away what the actual horror turns out to be in this film. This is a ride that you should enjoy blind, if you see what I mean. But I could almost split this into 2 halves. The first half is very Blair Witch, just the weird stuff they find. They get lost, they take refuge in a hut for the night, and they hear all these spooky goings on and stuff. The first half of the film is definitely my favourite. It's really good. The second half goes a bit more midsummery, which is kind of appropriate given that we're in Sweden for this one. I wasn't as enamoured by the second half, but that might just be a me thing because I've seen so many horror films in my life. It's not easy to take me by surprise anymore with the second half of any horror film, and I was kind of on the fence with what they do with the second half of this, but other people might think it's brilliant. Honestly, I'm still going to give it 3.5 out of 5. This one is slightly better than Margot. Good script here, good solid characters. They've been brave enough to make it an all-male cast. They haven't just chucked in the token love interest, you know. So I kind of liked this one, even though I'm only giving it 3.5. Next up we have Footsteps on the Moon. This is a 70s film. I thought it would be like an Italian giallo type thing. But we open up with an astronaut dragging another astronaut across the surface of the moon, and then he just leaves this person there and flies off in his spaceship. The abandoned astronaut is not Matt Damon, by the way, but all this turns out to just be a dream that some woman is having back down on Earth. And if this wasn't weird enough, this same woman goes to work the following day and her boss is really mad at her because apparently she hasn't turned up for the previous 3 days. But this is news to the woman as far as she's concerned. She's been coming in all this time. But it turns out that she hasn't been coming in for the past 3 days. She's experiencing some kind of memory loss. She's got no recollection of the past 3 days. So she goes home and she finds a couple of clues that point her in the direction of some random seaside town. So she goes there to try and put the pieces together as to what's happened over the past 3 days. And, you know, she wants to solve the mystery, obviously. So this is a kind of investigative amnesia type film. It's a little bit bare bones in the second half. If you're expecting some really rich, complex mystery that's going to have your brain ticking in all sorts of different directions, you might be a little bit disappointed, because what you get in the second half doesn't quite match up to the intrigue and the setup of what you get early on with the moon dream and everything else that's going on. But the town that this woman goes to looks fantastic. The location scouting for this is top notch. The interiors of the hotels and the houses she ends up in look really, really nice. And the final scene in the movie is genius. Just the imagery of it alone is really fantastic. It's worth plodding your way through this film just to get to the last 5 minutes, in all honesty. It's not one of those films that's spoken in Italian and you get the subtitles. It is dubbed in English. I personally prefer just to have the actors speaking in their natural language and to get the subtitles, but it's a very, very small complaint. This is a weird little film. It won't be for everybody, but I kind of enjoyed it, and I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. Next up, we have Quicksand. This is about a couple who go on holiday to Colombia, I think. They're not just there for holidaying, they're also there because of some kind of conference or something, but they're trying to do some holiday type stuff in between the work. And one day they go out for a hike, but they end up in some kind of really dangerous area that's full of quicksand and snakes, and the two of them end up in quicksand and they're just stuck there. And for the rest of the movie, we're watching them as they're trying desperately to get out. So this is one of those films that's set entirely in one location for the most part. Very difficult thing to pull off. I've only ever seen 2 films that have made something like this work. One of them would be Fall. The other one would be 47 Meters Down. I've seen a lot of other such films that have not been as successful, and this would just about go into that latter camp, unfortunately. There's just not enough going on while the characters are in the quicksand. There's not enough cool ideas happening. There's not enough to keep you entertained. This couple are going through some kind of marriage crisis as well. That part of the film is fine, but in terms of dangers all around them, there's only really the occasional snake that turns up to give us a bit of a scare. And for the most part, I'm just not overwhelmed by this one. I'm going to give it 2 out of 5, which would make it our weakest film of the video so far. You can probably guess what this one's about just from the title. It's a Spanish film, another one from the 70s. It's actually spoken in Spanish with English subtitles on the bottom. So we've got a recently widowed woman here who invites 13 people to come and stay with her in her huge mansion building. She thinks that one of these 13 murdered her husband, but she doesn't know which. She wants to get to the bottom of the mystery. But not long after everybody has arrived, people start to die one by one. But is it the woman doing the killings? Is it one of the 13? Is it the same person who originally murdered the husband? We will eventually get our answers, and I'll say right here, I found those answers quite satisfying on the whole. I was also pleased with who dies and who doesn't in this movie, if you see what I mean. But it's such a talky script. Like, the whole movie is basically just talking and dialogue. There's not much happening apart from the occasional kill scene near the end. There's one scene where everybody's at a dining table. This is before anybody has died. And it just goes on forever. It's just talking and talking and talking. It's like the Council of Elrond in Lord of the Rings or something. I get that there is generally lots of talking in any movie, but it's excessive in this one. There's just so many instances of people talking and talking way past the point where I would normally have expected the scene to have changed, if you see what I mean. But it's still an entertaining watch, definitely one that I would only ever watch once. I think it's another one that I caught on Shudder, and I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. So we've arrived at our movie of the video. That doesn't sound very good, that, does it? Movie of the video. I need to come up with something better, but for now, let's just talk about this movie. So it's called The Girl with All the Gifts, and I'm shocked that I had never heard of this film before I watched it on Sunday, because it's extremely good. It feels like the sort of thing that would be quite high profile as well. It's got some really famous actors in it. Gemma Arterton, Glenn Close, Paddy Considine. So it's a zombie film, essentially, but with a twist. So we begin in like an army base. At some point after the apocalypse has happened, there are zombies outside the fence, and the world has totally gone to ruin, but some army bases are still surviving, heavily fortified bases here and there around the UK. Inside this base, there are a bunch of children who are kept locked up because somehow they've gotten like the zombie disease, but it hasn't turned them into zombies, it's turned them into vampires instead, weirdly. Instead of putting these kids down, though, they're kept locked up and they're allowed a bit of education and playtime and stuff. They're still like normal kids, but you don't want to get too close to them. You know, they're kept constrained for a reason. And there's lots of tension in the base as to whether these kids should be killed or not. But I don't want to take the plot too far with this one, because you should discover what happens for yourself. But it's a really engaging film. There's so much good action that happens in this. It feels like a more expensive film than its £4 million budget. There are scenes with huge crowds of soldiers and zombies and stuff. It feels like a big budget movie. It's solid, really, really good stuff. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5, and I was very, very close actually to giving it 4.5 out of 5. So if you only watch one of these 7 movies, choose this one, The Girl with All the Gifts. So our 7th and final film today is also probably the weakest. It's not what I would call a stinker of the week or anything like that. It's just the worst of this particular bunch of films, I would say. It's a film from Thailand. It's spoken in Thai with English subtitles. And it's another one of those singular location films, a little bit like Quicksand. So basically what we've got here, there's a guy who is sunbathing on like a floatable dinghy thing, but he falls asleep and he doesn't notice that the pool is draining all around him. And when he wakes up, the pool is like half full, but he can't get out anymore. Now, this is the first of many problems I had with this movie. I don't understand why there's no ladder on the side of the swimming pool that he can just climb back up. I've been to many, many swimming pools throughout my life. I've never seen one that doesn't have a ladder on the side that you can climb up in the event that the pool is drained. I've never seen that before, but apparently it seems to be a thing in Thailand. Thailand really needs to up its health and safety. That's what I should say. But the thing is, there's lots of things about this movie that fall into that category, things that don't quite add up, things that you just point at and say to yourself, that wouldn't happen, or he wouldn't decide to do that, or that wouldn't happen at the same time as that. So many illogical things in the plot. You know, another example, like, so he's stuck in this pool for ages, and then a pizza guy turns up, which could potentially have been his rescue, but the pizza guy turns up at the exact moment that the guy just happens to have his head under the water trying to do something with the drain on the bottom of the pool, and the coincidence, it's just too much. And if it was just one thing across the runtime, I'd ignore it, but it's like 4, 5, 6 things where I'm just looking at this and thinking, no, that the script needed to be tightened up here. That this just could not work if this was a real situation. I'd say that this film is actually more entertaining than Quicksand, to be fair, because the whole film isn't just the guy trapped in this pool. That there's a crocodile farm nearby, and a crocodile has escaped. So it's not very long before a crocodile ends up in the pool with this guy, which is kind of frightening. There's lots to enjoy about the pool, but it's just these little moments of realism or lack of that spoil it a little bit for me. Quicksand is a more boring film, but it is a hell of a lot more realistic. So out of the two of them, I'd have to say Quicksand deserves a smidgen more credit, but I'm still going to give The Pool 2 out of 5, which is the same score I gave Quicksand, but this one, for me, just slightly the worst of the 7 films. Right, I'll leave it there for today. The best film in this video, definitely The Girl with All the Gifts, and like I said, this one, The Pool, would be the worst. Do let me know in the comments if you've seen anything decent recently. I particularly like to hear from anybody who has any good recommendations of films that are currently free on Sky Cinema, Amazon Prime, Shudder, or YouTube, because I've got all those things. But other than that, I'll say thank you for watching, and I'll see you again another time. Bye-bye.